Okay, hi, it's me again. Today I wanted to make. Yeah, this is recording. And today I wanted to make a more controversial video than my first video. Um, like Cat Black, True Tea series, like those type of videos that the YouTuber Cat Black makes, like they are so fun in my opinion. They are sometimes a lot of times relatable. They are really entertaining, and I think that they are good, like great videos. So I want to still borrow the idea. Okay, no, but I want to just like take inspiration from that concept. To just say what I feel doesn't need to be true. Doesn't need to be like it's more feeling based than fact based. So here I'm talking about trans men and oppression and a lot of stuff, intersectionality also. Disclaimer, I'm not so well versed in intersectionality. This is more my feelings on the matter from someone who is not that well into reading, but I heard a lot of opinion. The thing is that I consume better stuff and I digest better content when it's like talk to me. It's not like written. I don't know why, but I have a horrible attention span. I just don't. I cannot read for more than 2 hours. And all those books that people recommend are always like more than 100 pages long. And I know that's a small book typically, but for me it's a lot. I cannot read that, at least not in one sit, or I usually forget to read that, and that's like bad. But I can watch a really long video, and it will be okay for me. So yeah, that's the disclaimer. But yeah, today I want to talk about how the oppression that it's transmasculine specific and transmasc specific, all the spectrum, I know it's a broader spectrum. How that oppression it's always erased and minimized, and it's erased the specific part of that oppression. I don't know if I'm expressing myself well, but another disclaimer. I want to say that transmasculine, like I could make an entire video about how I define transmasculine, but let's keep it simple for this video. If you think that you have a transmasculine experience, whatever that means, you are the subject of this conversation, okay? So yeah, we're not going to define transmasculine in this video. It's too complex. Yeah. um, that away, I feel the people in this conversation, especially the trans community, because trans misogyny and all of that is always discussed in the trans community. Really, I don't see many cis people discussing the intricacies of trans masculinity and trans femininity and trans neutrality and trans androgyny. Like, I don't see cis people talking about that because it's pretty, you need to experience it to know how it feels like and have a well versed opinion on it. And it's I don't feel it's bad for cis people to talk about it, but I prefer hearing trans people give an opinion. Now, um, I think that everyone who is trans and has expend like 2 seconds on trans community knows like the concept of trans misogyny. It's a pretty interesting concept. I think there's a lot of merit in it, and I think it's a real thing. Like I'm not saying that it's not real, that trans women are not oppressed. I totally think that trans women have a specific type of transphobia that they faced, and it's important for the general trans community to check their trans misogyny, because it's real that trans women face a lot of intercommunal violence and transphobia. Now, if you don't know what the concept is the specific oppression that trans feminine people, so trans women and trans femmes, that's how I would describe it, or anyone who identifies under the trans feminine umbrella, so typically AMAV feminine people, all those, the oppression that those trans people face, okay? And it's a real specific concept. Like, I would recommend for you to hear from a trans feminine person what trans misogyny is. So I'm not going to dabble a lot on that because I think it's not my thing to define. But yeah, it's a specific experience for trans women and trans femmes. Sorry if I'm saying trans woman and at some point I say trans woman when I mean trans feminine people. For you to know, I'm trying to fix that, but generally when I say trans woman, I mean trans femmes. Okay, so what's my problem with this? I don't have a problem with the definition of trans misogyny. Not trans Yeah, trans misogyny. I don't have a problem with that concept. I think it's really useful. But what I have a problem with is that why don't we have a term for trans masculine specific, like, bigotry? Because most people, when they hear the concept of a trans masculine specific experience and trans masculine specific advocacy, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that well, but advocacy, I think that they just have a flashback, like men's right activists, and they say, no, you're misogynist, like, all of that shit. And I get it. It can be pretty like, oh no, do you think like men are more oppressed than women? And I don't think that. I think that my opinion on this is that, look, we shouldn't be fighting over this, over who is more oppressed, because that's not productive. We should be fighting when we shouldn't be fighting. We should be discussing the specific experiences of certain identities. And also we should be discussing the possible overlap between these identities, this is experiences, sorry. A trans masculine person can face something that typically trans feminine people face. A trans neutral person can face what typically trans masculine people face. And all the connections are done. You can say that about every type of identity because things overlap, and that's like how things work, okay? So my thing is that I don't see why there's so much pushback from, like, the idea of transmasculine specific spaces and transmasculine specific identities, because if people are okay with trans feminine people talking about their experiences, their specific experiences for them, I don't see why there's so much pushback against trans masculine people, because here's when I get a bit mad, because all this concept of trans misogyny comes from the idea of intersectionality, okay? This is where I don't know when it started, this concept of intersectionality works like in a stack. You stack oppressions. Like you are like, in the case of trans feminine people, you are trans and you're woman, and you are feminine. In case of, I don't know, black women, you're black and you're a woman. Okay, and yeah, that's okay, but people don't think you're with white men, you're white and you're men. People don't think that that's tagged. People think that's the default. People, for example, when we talk about anti-blackness, well, no, that's another example. I'm going to talk about that later. But I don't know, when we talk about yeah, I'm going to give this example. When we talk about anti anti-transness, so transphobia, we think about, okay, there's transphobia and there's transmisogyny. We never think there's a specific experience of trans men. No, we think that that experience of transphobia, a specific trans man, it's like the default. And look, that's so fucking harmful, in my opinion. That's so fucking harmful. Because you're saying that trans men are, like, men are the default. You can be trans and you can be a trans woman. You know? Like, that's harmful. Like, I'm going to say that. Like, men and manhood, it's not the default. I think that we already, in the trans community, knew that. And also, why that also applies to, like, fucking non-binary people and everyone who is like not under the trans binary umbrella. Okay, I don't know when the idea of, you know, only trans women being oppressed in a specific way started, because I think that anyone who spoke about the oppression of anyone who speaks to a trans masculine person can start to identify that there's some experiences that, you know, trans women typically wouldn't experience. For example, this is a really mainstream example, and I think it's like a good way of you know, showing how this works. Do you remember the transmedicalist stuff and the transgender shit? Most people who were transgenders were like AFAB, typically transmasculine or trans neutral people who were AFAB and who, you know, have boobs. And look, I'm not saying that everyone who has boobs it's trans feminine, but if you hear the stories of these people who were harassed and sometimes were bullied into self-harm attempts, these people who faced a lot of transphobia were targeted specifically for being trans and a cringy AFAB person. This is something that almost always happened to transmasculine and trans neutral people who were AFAB. And look, I hate the usage of this as a AFAB exclusive experience because I don't like the binarization of transness, but that's the only way I know how to describe it. If you are non-binary and AFAB, or if you're just non-binary and don't want me to use that type of language, I'm totally open to be corrected. I'm totally aware that that can be pretty problematic language, but that's the only way I can describe it. That's the only way I can describe it, because this is a pretty transmasculine and trans neutral, specifically usually transmasculine experience of transphobia. And you know, we can talk more about the way trans men and other intersections in trans manhood can be really specific, and I don't see why that's seen as the default transphobia. I don't see why people get so defensive and think it's problematic to have a transmasculine specific conversations when that can be really useful. I know that it's not as tangible in some way. I know it's seen as, you know, you're not that oppressed. But as I said before, I don't see why being more oppressed, it's like a reason for this other group who is also oppressed. Like, you are more oppressed, so this other group doesn't deserve care and doesn't deserve a specific liberation. Because I don't think it comes all to the idea that the man and manhood, it's also oppressed under the patriarchy. It's not oppressed in the same way that women are, and I think there's a lot of value in feminism. But I remember this Contrapoint video that talks about men needing liberation and a movement for men to relate. Well, I'm saying the same fucking shit with trans men. I remember there was this video. Sorry, I don't remember the channel. This is a rant. This is not prepared. But I remember this video about this person, this trans person that made this term for specific trans masculine targeted transphobia. You know, like all that. I think that's pretty useful because that can make, especially cis people and non-trans masculine people, that can make them, like, you know, realize there's targeted stuff that, no, there's a specific transphobia towards trans men. You know, like the idea that our sex makes us more soft and less able to have agency and less entitled of, you know, less worthy of the respect and makes us infantilized. That's a problem. That's not a privilege. That's still dehumanizing. I know it's not the same, and I don't want to compare it to being murdered or being seen as a threat. You know, that thing that specifically it's trans misogynist, but that's when I get the example of how black people speak about black men. Black men face a specific type of anti-blackness that it's not, like, they don't experience lighter or less bad racism. They experience a specific type of racism and a specific type of, I don't like this term, but it's the only term I know, anti-manhood. It's not the same as the way trans women are treated, but because trans women are trans women, I'm saying, sorry, black women, because black women are seen as also, like, they stacked, you know, racism, you know, anti-blackness, and, you know, misogyny. So they have misogynoir, like, because they have that experience. It's like, oh yeah, so black men don't have specific experiences of black men. And I'm sorry, I'm talking as a white person about black issues, but that's the only thing I could compare it of. Like, I think that we have this thing in the trans community where we see manhood as the default, and that's bad. I think we already knew that manhood, it's not the default. That's like a really misogynist stuff. That's not true. Not true. And also, I would technically be part of the non-binary stuff, but I don't use the label non-binary. I consider myself genderless. But that's more narcissistic shit, you know? It's only on label. I usually consider myself practically transmasculine and a binary male. That's like my shit. But I think that there's also value in speaking about non-binary specific oppression, because there's me as someone who is really involved in the trans community, online trans community, I think there's something to be talked about there. So yeah, that's not my experience to say, but here's me as a trans masculine person, as a man, a manly man, a manly trans man. I want to, you know, start a conversation. I know this video is probably going to get like 2 comments, but not even 2 comments, like 2 views. But yeah, that's my rant. This is more a channel for myself, and you know, you can correct me, we can have a chill conversation about this. But yeah, that's my point. This is not something new I'm bringing to the world. There's people, trans masculine people, that already talked about this. If I find the, like, this text that I saw about a trans masculine person speaking about their experience and their frustration related to this, I'm going to leave it in the description. But yeah, that's a discussion I think we should speak about. You know, if I find more videos that I mentioned in this video, I'm going to leave it all in the description, or you can search it. I said the names of the creators, like I said them. So yeah, here's my terere, by the way. If you ask what's this is terere. It's yummy and sweet. But yeah, bye.